We're recording the interview of Ryan Blackburn. This interview is being conducted by Erica Carter from the Wright State University Veterans Project. This interview is being recorded at Wright State University in the New Mankia Incubator. It is 10:26 a.m. on August 17th, 2018. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Wonderful. Where and when were you born?
I was born September 25th, 1983, in Columbus, Ohio, and grew up there until I joined the military 20 years after that. So,
Who are or were your parents, and what were their occupations?
My father, William Blackburn II, he still lives in Columbus, Ohio. He was a 4-year veteran of the Army, spent some time in Korea. He was a radar operator in the Army, and that's really about all I had to know about military service was from him. And then my mom, she was grew up with 3 other sisters, also in Columbus, Ohio. She's still there. She was a stay-at-home mom. She raised me, my older brother, and my younger sister until we all went off and did our thing.
Did any of your brothers and sisters serve?
They did not. Nope. My sister's much younger than I am. She's still in her 20s, so I still try to push her that way. But no, I don't think it's going to happen. I tried to push her the Air Force way, but I don't think it's going to happen. No, my brother didn't serve either. So,
What were you doing before you entered the service?
sure. So I graduated high school in 2002. I was working as an assistant manager at a department store. I started to go to college. I did a couple semesters. It wasn't really for me at the time. So that's when I kind of hit the roadblock of, what do I do? Do I, try college again? Do I go somewhere else? Do I move? Do I just try to work my way up in my career? And then that's really the first time that joining the military kind of hit me as an option. So I went straight and talked to a recruiter, kind of figured out maybe what I wanted to do, what branch of service. My dad was the Army veteran, but never really talked about too much. He did 4 years, and then he was, a phone man for the phone companies, working on phone lines all across Ohio after that. So I never got the full kind of military story from him, so I really wasn't, too aware of what the military had to offer. So that's kind of probably late 2003 is when that would have been when I went and visited the recruiter's office. Kind of liked what I heard, as probably a lot of people do. But that's when I went back home and told my parents, and my dad, gave me the thumbs up, and of course my mom gave me the thumbs down, because obviously this was 2 years fresh after 9/11. Yeah, so we went back in, I signed some papers, and off I went probably a year later. So.
What branch?
I went in the Air Force. Much to my dad's chagrin, probably. When I said I was joining the military, he probably leaned more Army. But I just liked the jobs more that were offered in the Air Force. So at that time in 2003, there was what they called the entry program, which I'm sure it still exists today. But there's a lot of people, that just shows the patriotism of the country 2 years after 9/11, a lot of people that wanted to join the military and go help. So I signed up in mid to late 2003, and I didn't leave until August of 2004. So I was in that delayed entry for over a year after I went and enlisted. And I signed up to be a loadmaster. I wanted to fly in the big cargo planes and help load them and do all the logistics work with all that. So about 6 months into my delayed entry, the recruiter called and said that job no longer existed for whatever reason. So I just kind of went into open status. And for that whole year of delayed entry, there was 2 or 3 times where my recruiter had called and said, okay, you're going to leave for basic training, next week, get your things ready. Then I get a call the night before and say, oh, no, something happened, the job went away, or, something like that again. So I'd have to, go back to square one, go back to the job. And he called me at the end of July of 2004 and said, hey, can you get a top secret security clearance? And I said, I don't know why I wouldn't be able to. I scored well on my ASVAB test, and he said, there's a job for an intelligence analyst, but you have to leave on Wednesday, and this was on a Saturday. So I said, sure, got my things ready, and a couple days later, off I went, early August of 2004.
To basic training?
To basic training, yep. And again, I mean, even being in delayed entry for a year and, thinking about the military for a year before that, I mean, I didn't know probably enough that I should have when I got off that bus at basic. And I'm sure a lot of people have that same reaction of stepping off the bus, the big guys and gals in the big hats start yelling at you, and then you just think, oh man, what am I doing? But you get through the first couple weeks, and it gets a lot better. It was 7 weeks at that time, basic, back in 2004. I think it's 8 or 9 now for the Air Force.
Are there any particular drill instructors that you remember that stand out?
I don't. No, I went in with the mindset of, be the guy in the back that, they don't even know your name, just kind of, don't raise your hand, but just do what you're told and kind of, skate in the back, and hopefully, it was a strategy that worked because I don't think they knew my name until probably week 3. But, that's how I wanted to do it. You just keep telling yourself, they're here to train you, they're putting on a little bit of a show to kind of break you down and build you back up. So I think that helped. But I ended up losing, 20 plus pounds in the 6.5 weeks. So it was a great workout. And I actually enjoyed the last couple weeks. We went out in the field, did the obstacle course, slept in the tent for the week, that type of field training stuff. So, it turned into something I really enjoyed. So yeah, it was quite an experience. I didn't know anything about rank. I didn't know anything about enlisted or officer or, the history of the Air Force. And that's the first thing they really start drilling into you. But yeah, like I said, I went in probably a little ill-prepared. I probably should have done a little more research before joining, but I made it through. That's what counts.
That is what counts.
Yes.
AIT or job training?
Yep, so job training, tech school, as we call it in the Air Force. That was I think it was 6.5 months, so it was one of the longer ones. As you're kind of going through basic, you start making friends, and what job are you doing? What job are you doing? And every, the majority of jobs, oh yeah, my training's up here, over here, 6 or 8 weeks long. I know there's an Air Force base in northern Texas and one in Mississippi that does a lot of the Air Force technical training schools for the careers. And then I started learning mine. I'm way out in West Texas, kind of out in the middle of nowhere. In San Angelo, Texas, about an hour south of Abilene. And, I heard it was, 6.5 months long. And I'm thinking, man, what did I get into? This seems very odd. Everybody else is doing 6 to 8 weeks at these other 2 large bases, and they're shipping me out west for intel school. But that's where Air Force intel school is, and that's where the firefighters are. And that's about it. So that's where the 2 main schools are for intel and firefighters. And it was a great experience, but it was literally tumbleweeds blowing across the road. I mean, just what you think about West Texas of, high school football and the tumbleweeds and just flat as can be and very hot. That's exactly what it was. But had a great time. I turned 21 the first week I was there, so it almost was like, 6 months of college for me at that point. So we had a great time, learned a ton. That's where I learned my job was actually going to be a lot of public speaking, which I had no idea going into. And I turned out to be pretty good at it, which was good because a lot of people, everybody was very nervous when we heard that. We spent a couple months working on, building PowerPoint presentations and doing research and analytics. And, you have to stand up in front of a group, once a week to really, get the feel for public speaking and deliver training presentations. Because that's what a lot of my job was going to entail for the next 6 years, was, researching threats and training pilots on those threats and, counter maneuvers and countermeasures and all that good stuff. So that's a lot of what the first half of the tech school was about was, here's Microsoft Office, here's how to do public speaking. You're going to do as much as you can. You're going to feel as uncomfortable as you can so you can get better at it. So that was kind of a surprise when I got there. And then the last half was really just learning about all the different, threats and weapon systems and electronics and anything that could be a threat to a pilot or an Air Force member. And that's really what the job started to entail. So about 6.5 months later, I graduated that. I was a distinguished graduate when I graduated, one of 2 out of my class. So I was really excited. And then I got my first duty assignment shortly after. So.
Well, congratulations on your distinguished grad.
Thank you.
Where was your first duty assignment?
Sure. So this was another, I guess, luck of the draw for me. I was there, and you get them probably 4 to 5 months in, just a month or two out from leaving tech school. You start getting your orders to your first duty assignment, and you saw some North Dakotas and some New Mexicos and things like that. The bases you've already learned about in the Air Force that may not be the most glamorous. But then I got mine, which was Spangdahlem Air Force Base in Germany. So I was super excited. One of the reasons I joined was to travel and see the world, and I was just terrified that my first duty assignment was, going to be in Ohio or, Illinois or somewhere close to home where, it was a 4-hour drive away from where I grew up for the last 20 years. So when I got the overseas assignment, I was thrilled. There was a couple other from my class that got the same assignment, so we all went over together at the same time, which really helped. Because we joined the same office at the same time. I had some familiar faces, which can be a very good thing, especially at not only your first duty assignment, but being in on another continent, in another country as well. So that really helped when a lot of us kind of graduated at the same time and we went over there. And I ended up loving the base. It was very small, which I think was very appealing, because they have Ramstein Air Base over there, which is just, very large, very Americanized. I mean, you feel like when you're on the base, you just feel like, you're in a city in America somewhere. But Spangdahlem was so small, most people lived outside the wire, where, you get an apartment, above a pizza shop, on some random small town street in Germany. So you really got the more European kind of feel for life. So I spent 2 years there and absolutely loved it. And also a good thing about Spangdahlem was the location in Germany. We got to travel a lot. We were, basically on a train every weekend that we could. It was a 4-hour train ride to Brussels, Belgium. It was a 4-hour drive up to Amsterdam. It was a 30-minute train ride to Luxembourg, 4 hours to the Black Forest in Italy, and a 4-hour train ride to Paris. So we went to Paris a few times as well. So try to make the most out of that, doing the travel on the off time as well. So we really enjoyed that. So. Really, really excited with the first duty assignment.
So it just sounds like you're having an amazing career, amazing time, and adapting well.
Yeah. So at that point, I started feeling like, okay, I think I made the right decision here. As we started doing the job now too, Spangdahlem, at that time at least, was F-16s and A-10s, two very different aircraft with two pretty similar missions at the time, especially for the wars that we were fighting. Providing close air support for ground troops. Not a lot of air-to-air threats in Iraq and Afghanistan. So the Air Force kind of adopted the new mission of, we have all these fighter jets, let's provide this close air support. And that's what A-10s were made for. Fly low, just giant steel machines that can just, get shot up by small arms fire and be fine. And then the F-16s kind of adapted that role. As the years went on in Iraq and Afghanistan to fight that fight. So I really started enjoying the job a lot. Well, I was in the Operations Support Squadron at Spangdahlem. So we kind of did the oversight of all of the air operations on base and provided intel support, kind of to both F-16 units and the A-10 unit as well. So it was nice to kind of, get your feet wet in kind of both of the fields. Very strategic level kind of planning. So not doing a lot of the tactical stuff yet, but you really started to learn a lot, do a lot of the presentations, figure out where to research, what to research, meet a lot of the pilots, because that's a whole different language almost that they speak. And being an intel analyst in the Air Force, I mean, that's one of the few jobs where you're basically working with the pilots every day. And then being an enlisted E3 21-year-old, that was, kind of intimidating at first to do that. But made a lot of good friends, met a lot of good people over there, and really started to enjoy the job. So yeah, I really felt, just a year or two in that, this was probably the right decision, and I felt good about it. So.
What was a normal day like? PT?
Yeah, so get up, do the PT. We at least did it 3 times a week as a flight, but I would get up and run every day. Usually run to our SCIF, our facility, our intel facility, which was an old underground bunker, so it was kind of a cool place to work. But it was about 1.5 miles away from my dorm. I lived on base at the time, being a young airman. So yeah, get up do the PT, if weather permitting. I didn't have a car over there, so I would just run right to work, get the exercise there. Yeah, and then it was, unless operations kind of shifted, a good way to explain it was just kind of a basic kind of 8 to 5 job there for a while. Go in, get on your computer, do your stuff. We put together kind of a intel news report every morning, just from all different sources. It was kind of the one page, here's what's happening in the world overnight type thing, and we'd send it to the commanders. That was kind of our big project for the day. What we worked on in the morning a lot was just kind of getting that report out. But yeah, and then just doing trainings and learning about weapons and systems and aircraft, both friendly and adversary, and doing as much learning as we could. But yeah, mostly Monday through Friday, and then, like I said, the weekends when we were available, we were on a train somewhere, going somewhere fun. So.
Wonderful. 2 years there.
2 years there, correct.
You're assigned where next?
Well, 2 years there, with a couple of TDYs in between. So I want to say my first TDY was in 2005 to an exercise called Cope Thunder, which was at Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska. And I gotta say, it's probably the longest flight I've ever been on, from Germany to Alaska with one stop. I was in the back of a C-17 we flew, which isn't as bad as it seems because, once you're airborne, you get your sleeping bag out and you just lay right next to the pallets in the back and take a nap, or go back on the kind of the back ramp area and you get a little incline, and it was pretty comfortable actually. A little cold, but not too bad. But we stopped in Bangor, Maine one time, and then fueled up and hit the air again to Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska, which was a great opportunity as well to travel. Going from Germany to Alaska, one end of the world to the other, basically. And it's in outside of Fairbanks, Alaska, which I'd heard of Fairbanks, Alaska, so I was, thinking it's a, Columbus, Ohio, or even like a Dayton, Ohio type place. But it was more of like a Lancaster, Ohio, a very small town. I think they just got their first Walmart when I got there in 2005, which was the big deal. So. It was a little eye-opening. And to get from Eielson Air Force Base into Fairbanks, the big city, you drove through a town called North Pole, Alaska. So it was pretty interesting, but you could see Mount McKinley from the base, the largest mountain in North America. So that was kind of cool. It was October is when I went, and it was 5 inches of snow every day. Every parking space had an outlet to plug your engine into for your car, so it wouldn't freeze in the winter. So again, just a whole different world up there. But we did a lot of training up there. That was my first time working with F-22s, which was really cool, learning about that aircraft, because at that time it was just kind of coming online back in 2005. So spent a few weeks up there. And I think after that was the first time I actually went back home. So on my way back to Germany, I stopped back in Columbus for a few weeks for kind of my first vacation to see family again. A lot of my friends were going to college at the time. So, meeting back up with them, sharing the stories. They're all still in Central Ohio, and here I'm living in Germany at 21 years old. So it was kind of different. But still stayed in touch with the most people. And also back then, that's before, cell phones. They were just kind of coming online, but not really in Europe yet. So you couldn't get an international phone. So I would still buy calling cards and use a good old payphone to call home. So it's still pretty expensive to call home. So social media wasn't around quite yet. So it was, kind of a different world of staying in contact back then. So it was good to get home and kind of re-energize and talk to the family and friends back home. And then went back to Germany, and then make sure I get the dates right. I think it was January of, no, it would have been the latter half of 2006 was my first deployment. And that was to Balad Air Base in Iraq.
Is this with the same, you're still in the same unit?
Still in the same unit, yeah. So a lot of my unit went, again, doing more strategic level intelligence. So we went to the 332nd Air Wing at Balad Air Base in Iraq. And I worked for the Operations Support Squadron there. And had a great experience. First deployment, you don't really know what to expect. Just the trip over there, it's, it takes a week to get over there from all the stops, and, you hang out for a while here, you hang out for a while here, then you finally catch a plane into Iraq type of thing. But yeah, then getting off the plane and just, you get to work, and it was a lot different. So I went back in '08 as well. and it felt like two different places. In 2006, there was still a lot of heavy fire onto the base at that time. You know, every day was a mortar or rocket coming on base, where you get an alarm red and you take cover. But about a month in, I mean, you almost become immune to it because you hear it 4 or 5 times a day, and I mean, you shouldn't, but you really do. One of the jobs I had there was going out to the cargo aircraft, the C-17s, the C-130s, and even the big C-5s. So when they would land, they would come in, get unloaded, load back up, and go. And my job was to get up, climb in the cockpit. I drive a truck out there, talk to the pilots as quickly as I can. We debrief them, say, hey, what'd you see? You know, when you were landing, anything happen? So we get reports from that and kind of disseminate it throughout the base. But there was one close call with an alarm red. I had the truck parked out on the flight line, went into the debrief, I got back in, and about 15, 20 seconds later, I look in the rearview mirror and a mortar had hit right on the flight line. Pretty much where the truck was parked. So that was kind of that was a couple months in where, as you're starting to get immune to kind of that alarm red stuff, that kind of recycled that real quick. So I really enjoyed the job over there as well. Like I said, a lot more strategic stuff with debriefing the pilots of the cargo aircraft and doing the intel reports. I would brief the one-star general, the base commander, twice a week with the intel update. My major at the time, our flight chief, liked my public speaking skills and was real confident with me, so he gave me the opportunity as a senior airman to go and do that presentation in front of a general every day, or twice a week, which was a great opportunity. Very nerve-wracking, obviously, at first when you're at a conference table with the low-ranking people are the 06s on the side, and then you're staring at a one-star general for the first time, again as an airman in the Air Force. So probably a little shaky the first couple times, but then you got used to it, and he's called me by my first name by the time I leave there and coined me before I left and everything. So it was a great opportunity, and also doing that intel report, we got to stay up on a lot of the stuff that was going on in Iraq at the time. 2006 was a very active time still for a lot of the stuff going on. So we'd brief our commander quite a bit, and sometimes the Army side would come over as well and get the updates, especially if we had a lot of stuff that kind of tied in with what they were doing, or base defense stuff we worked on a lot as well. So really the latter half, I was attached to the BDOC, which is the Base Defense Operations Center there. And again, it's kind of because we knew a guy that had worked over there and liked what I did. He had met me at these briefings I did. So really, I don't know if it happened before, but they kind of pulled me from the Air Force side over to the Army side for a little bit. And they wanted to get me out and do some of these, conduct some patrols outside the wire at night, where we go out to the checkpoints at Balad, manned by local Iraqis mostly, and just kind of debrief them on, hey, what'd you see? What's going on out here tonight? That type of stuff. Take them a couple Red Bulls. You're all good with them. So I did that for a lot of the last half of my deployment. There was a lot of the base defense stuff, but yeah, really enjoyed it. There was a theater on base, a pool on base. It was a huge air base. I would say probably the biggest one in Iraq. So it was interesting to fly in there and see the operations, and you're working with Army and Navy and Marines and joint coalitions from other countries, and to get your boots down on the ground in a war zone for the first time was nice. Most Air Force deployments at the time were 3 to 4 months long. They had just upped the Air Force on the intel side to 6 months. We figured that out when we got there. So there's only 3 of us that stuck around for 6 months. The rest of our team went home at 4, as originally slated, but they wanted to start getting the 6-month cycles going. So I was actually the first one to do that. Me and just 2 others stayed as the new crew came on. So it was kind of nice getting that new crew in there and being the senior expert in the room at that point. And really, it was nice continuity to have 2 months to kind of pass the torch to the new crew that was on board now anyway. So, but yeah, that was the last half of 2006. While I was there, I got my orders to Hill Air Force Base in Utah, out of Spangdahlem. So I went there in March of 2007. So basically got back to Iraq, had a couple months left in Germany, and then packed my things up, and from Germany to Utah I went.
Whoa.
I know, so yeah, I told you, you get me talking, and sometimes I can't stop.
No, that seems like such an amazing tour. Not a lot of people have that kind of experience, so I'm very happy for you.
Sure.
So you get back to Utah, or you get to Utah. What happened?
Sure. So, I was in Iraq when I got my orders to Utah, from Germany to Utah, and I was just thinking, I don't know about this. But I got out to Utah and absolutely loved it for 3 years. A little over 3 years, actually, I spent out there. And then the funny part about that was I had a friend who I still talk to. I grew up with him. I knew him since I was 5 years old. I'm still living in Columbus, Ohio. I told him I was moving, from Germany to Utah, and he said, "Yeah, I'll go with you." So stopped in Columbus, picked him up, and we drove from Columbus to Salt Lake City in April of 2007. And he moved out there with me, and he just wanted to kind of start fresh. And yeah, he went out there and he ended up, meeting his wife, having a kid, still lives out there to this day. So it worked out well for him. But yeah, he just wanted to kind of get out. And yeah, so that was kind of unique to, I took my buddy with me who knew nothing about the military also. But we got an apartment out there, got out there, met some people. Again, got attached to an operations support squadron when I got out there, which was nice. I already knew some people. I think I deployed with a couple. So, you're a few years in now, you start kind of knowing some people. And also Hill Air Force Base is mostly F-16s. So coming from an F-16 base to an F-16 base, there was a lot of continuity for me there. I liked the aircraft. I liked working with it. I liked learning about it. I knew a lot about it now. So I think that helped. But yeah, I got out there in 2007, did a lot of TDYs. We did a lot down at Nellis Air Force Base in Vegas. Just I think with the proximity, it was a 6-hour drive from Salt Lake City. So I think I probably did 3 or 4 TDYs in Vegas, which isn't the worst TDY in the world. But we did a lot of red flag exercises, which is one of the biggest air exercise in the world. So going down there and doing that and just working again with all these coalition countries and learning about all these other aircrafts, and it's a 2-week intense exercise. I think the Discovery Channel was down there when I actually was going through it. They did a documentary on red flag. So it was pretty cool going down there a couple times and learning just all about different aircraft. We went out into California a couple times with the Army folks and went out in the Humvees in the desert for a while, and kind of got that viewpoint of, we're supporting these aircraft in the air, but what are we supporting actually? So they would let us go down and, I drove a Humvee 2 hours into the middle of nowhere desert to watch, the F-16s drop some bombs out in the middle of nowhere, Nevada. So it was fun. It was good training to go down there too. A lot of people say, "Oh, you're going to Vegas again," but it was 2 weeks of very intense training. There wasn't a lot of going to the casinos or going to the strip. So a lot of good training down there, and then that brought me back into Balad again in 2008. So almost exactly 2 years after I left for the first time, they sent me back kind of for the same mission with the same unit and everything. So
you were like, "Hey guys."
Yeah. So at that point, I'm like, I know all about this base. But the funny part, you get to Balad 2 years later in 2008, and it felt like a whole different place. I don't want to say it felt like vacation because it obviously wasn't, but almost relatively speaking, it almost kind of felt that way because just the ops tempo at that time between 2006 and 2008 had, the war had shifted so much since then. It felt like being in a new place. Where I said, you're getting mortared every day back in 2006, that was maybe once a week now. And it felt a whole lot different being there. So we had a lot more flexibility being there. The job wasn't quite as intense at that time. 2 years later, people started figuring out, the best way to do things on the base. The base got a little bit nicer, facilities got upgraded, so it actually felt a lot better. So that's when I kind of somehow weaseled my way down into working with unmanned aerial vehicles, the UAVs. At that time, were starting to come online, so I got to work a lot with the people that would fly the UAVs and all the unmanned stuff. So that was kind of a new piece that I've never worked with before. So I spent a lot of the deployment doing that and helping those guys out. So that was really fun. So it felt like a same place, but a whole kind of different deployment feel to it at that time. So.
How long was that deployment? 6 months?
That was 6 months as well. Yeah, that was the latter half of 2008. So then when I got back after that, back to Hill Air Force Base, shortly after that I got attached to my first fighter squadron. So the 34th Fighter Squadron was one of the 3 active F-16 fighter units at Hill Air Force Base. So I became an NCO at that time as well. So I was the NCO in charge of the intelligence flight for the 34th Fighter Squadron. So it's basically, 25 F-16 pilots and 4 intel people, working in a big room all day. So we would develop training plans for the pilots, brief them on different missile threats and aircraft maneuvers, and that was our job. That was our day-to-day job, was getting up every day and briefing fighter pilots on the job. We go TDY directly with them. So probably my best TDY. Well, we had a good one in Louisiana. That was at, was it Beale? No, it's outside Shreveport, Louisiana. I can't think of the Air Force Base name now. But we did TDY down there. And then the best one we did, we got tasked to go out to MCAS Miramar, which was a Marine base out in San Diego, the Marine Corps Air Station Miramar, where they flew F-18s, the Marines did. And they wanted to do kind of a joint exercise, get some F-16s out there, fly with each other, kind of do some exercise stuff for 2 weeks. The best part about it was nobody really knew what we were doing yet, because it was kind of the first stab at it. So we only sent maybe half the pilots, half the aircraft, and then me as the intel person. So we went out to San Diego, and you think you're going from Air Force Base to Marine Corps base. You're thinking, oh man, this is going to be awful. But Miramar was just beautiful. Just northeast of downtown San Diego, up in the hills. They just redone all the lodging, so it was like staying in a brand new Hilton on base. We really enjoyed the people we worked with. We kind of did things on the fly because, like I said, we didn't really know what we were in for yet. So, our guys would fly from 8 to 2, and then we go to San Diego and find a different beach to go to, or go up to Camp Pendleton or something like that. So, probably the best TDY I've had, just because I fell in love with Southern California. And it was great to work with Marines too. That was kind of my first kind of hands-on experience working with Marines, and had a great experience with their F-18 pilots and their support folks as well. So. That was sometime 2009, I believe, was those 2 deployments.
So if I'm
or
keeping,
TDYs, sorry.
If I'm keeping track, 2 deployments and 4 TDYs?
Yeah, probably more TDYs.
Just, these are the memorable ones.
Yeah, I mean, there was probably 4 alone to Nellis in Vegas. I went to Shaw Air Force Base in South Carolina. I think that was before my first deployment, just kind of pre-deployment stuff. That one's memorable because that was my first deployment, because that's when you get the first kind of round of immunizations and shots for going on deployment. And I remember getting the smallpox vaccine. I got it in Germany, and right before we went to Shaw Air Force Base in South Carolina, we were doing our pre-deployment training and then going to Iraq. And they tell you when you get the smallpox, which isn't pleasant to begin with. You might develop like flu-like symptoms 11 to 14 days after the shot, or the shots, because they stab you like 15 times. So Shaw Air Force Base just happened to be 11 to 14 days after getting that, and I just remember just sitting in the hotel one night and just fever and just sweating, and I spent 2 days in the hotel room because I couldn't move. Everybody else that got the shot was fine, and that's what they say. They say some people are fine, some people aren't. And apparently I was one of the ones that aren't. So I guess that's a memorable experience for a TDY too, and kind of a different reason. But yeah, that's probably the TDY outlook at that time. So probably 6 to 8 TDYs, if you include all the ones to Vegas, San Diego, Louisiana, Alaska, South Carolina. I think that's probably it.
You got to travel.
I got to travel, yeah. Yeah, definitely got to travel, so.
That is great. So Mom gave you the thumbs down originally.
Yes.
How does she feel 4 years into your deployments and stuff?
She wasn't a fan of the deployments, but I think at that time everybody started to realize, okay, this was the right choice. I started a great career. My second tour in Iraq, I had started working on an online degree, and I was using tuition assistance, so I was in the military, so getting free higher education out of it, and doing all this great stuff. And I think the tides had probably turned at that point of, she was obviously the nervous mom with a child on deployment, but outside of that, I think she really felt like it was the right thing for me. Now, if I would have re-enlisted again, I don't know, but yeah, I think most everybody, friends, family, everybody at that time said, okay, yeah, that was a right decision. He's doing great work, and yeah, he's having a good time. So.
Did you go home to visit often?
Yeah, I try to as much as possible. Probably once or twice a year if I could. but again, try to maybe tack it onto an end of a TDY type thing. Especially living in Germany, I'm pretty sure before or after I went to Shaw Air Force Base, I went home again. So where you could kind of get the flight back stateside, so you're not paying for a flight from Europe to America at that time. But yeah, probably once or twice a year, if not a little more. We try to go back home and see the friends and family and things.
When you came off your deployments, especially in 2006, how was it coming home with maybe the civilians or the military?
Sure. Yeah, you kind of felt the hero's welcome at that time. The people in the airport and buying your meal if you had your uniform on, that type of thing. So it was all very supportive, I would say, from friends, family, civilians. I never had a bad experience, being a combat veteran at that time. But yeah, and that's true for probably all three of my deployments. Was nothing but handshakes and hugs and things like that. So.
Okay. So you finish at in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
You go back home, or you go back to Utah.
Yes.
Where are you at now?
So still with the 34th Fighter Squadron, and then we had probably just gotten our orders to Afghanistan at that point. So my separation date was August of 2010, and then I learned I was going to be going to Afghanistan in January of 2010 with the fighter squadron. So I'd be attached to the fighter unit now, obviously much more tactical level stuff, which is a whole, obviously a whole different war, a whole different country, but a very whole different feel for my job and what we're doing. You feel really more into the fight now when you're training pilots that are going out to drop weapons on bad guys and then coming back and reviewing the tape and writing reports on it. So you really felt more into it, definitely, for Afghanistan. But yeah, we got our orders. We left in January of 2010. Stayed for 5 months through about the end of May, so almost 5 full months, I think, at Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan. Another great experience. Very high tempo. Some 18-hour days probably sometimes, where you just had enough time to go home and go back to the tent and get a nap. Facilities weren't quite as nice as Balad at that point. Bagram was an old Soviet airfield, and a lot of the old Soviet facilities were there as well. So not quite as vamped up as a lot of the Iraqi bases at that point. So yeah, it was a different feel. I remember getting to Afghanistan and getting very sick. Again, kind of flu-like stuff. Working through a fever. For the first week I was there, working 16-hour days. It was miserable. And the operations tempo was very high. We were doing a lot of flying, a lot of bomb dropping, a lot of big stuff while we were over there. Bagram was kind of in the northeast part of Afghanistan, so there was still a lot of influx from the eastern part of the country that time. We had a lot of forward operating bases out there we supported, so there was a lot going on. So very high tempo all 5 months we were out there. But you develop great relationships, especially with the pilots. I mean, again, as an enlisted person in the Air Force, you don't get a whole lot of interaction with pilots usually. But you really, working with them every day, almost calling them by call signs at that point, which is almost, you're not supposed to do. But you really do. You become friends with these guys and gals because you're, going TDY with them. You're attached to them every day, and you're working with them side by side every day. So, kind of unique in that realm that you're working side by side with all these pilots day in and day out. And anything under a 12-hour shift over there was pretty good. We did 7 days on, 0 off for the first probably 2 months until we felt comfortable enough to kind of rotate a person out to get a day off during the week. So it was very high tempo. Had one big scare on base while we were there. We had a suicide bomber attack one of the entry control points, and actually insurgents got onto the airfield briefly. But of course that hit the news waves that night. I want to say it was probably halfway through the deployment, but just hours later it's on Fox News and CNN, and over there it was in the morning, but it was just becoming nighttime back in the U.S. So I knew a lot of my family and friends were going to start waking up to this news. Bagram Airfield got attacked. So sent some emails home and saying, everything's all right. But we had to kind of lock down and place, make sure the 9mm on my chest was ready to go. Because we were locked down for almost 5 or 6 hours just to make sure that they had cleared the base. So that was kind of the scary part, being on the base over there. Because again, not a whole lot kind of in or on the base at the time. So to have that happen on that airfield was kind of surprising. But yeah, everything went well after that. But yeah.
Did the news, CNN, Fox report it correctly? Like, was what happened the way they reported it?
Yeah, I'm trying to think back. I don't remember too big of discrepancies. Yeah, I don't think so. But of course, the headline is, Bagram airfield attacked. So, I knew my family and friends were going to wake up to this, and I knew they knew where I was. So that's where I knew I should probably, if I get a chance, give a call or an email saying I'm okay, everything's fine. But yeah, I think for the most part it was reported correctly. But yeah, it was kind of amazing to see, you hear it happen and then boom, here on unclassified news sources, hours later, the news is already out about it. And so seeing it work kind of that way was kind of interesting. But yeah, I think it was reported fine. But, obviously the giant headline I knew was going to grab attention. So.
Okay. Intense Afghan experience.
Yes.
You're coming home now.
Yes.
You got like 2 months left.
Yes.
How does that go? How does that feel?
That was another interesting part. So I was actually still taking online classes over there. So I actually completed my associate's degree while I was over there. Somehow, some way, I look back on it now and I don't know how that was possible. But then I was actually trying to, work on my resume when I could and, talk to my dad, hey, do you know anybody, looking for work? So as an Intel analyst, it's a pretty broad field. But I knew I could probably get a job at, one of the agencies outside DC or Northern Virginia. But I didn't want to. My goal at that point was to move back to Columbus with family and friends. So I knew I didn't want to move to Virginia or, DC. So, a lot of the time that I could over there, I was, working on my resume, doing job hunts, looking at job boards, trying to figure out what I wanted to do because I got back in May and I was out the door in August back to Ohio. So, yeah, it was a little intense. It was a little scary. We hear all the time about transition from military to civilian life, and that's where I really started to feel it kind of sinking in a little bit. Oh man, okay, I'm going back, great, but what am I going to do? Where am I going to live? And all that good stuff too. So it was kind of intense at that time in more ways than one, and getting a little scary too. So
you get home. Mom's happy to see you, of course.
Yes.
Did you find a job?
I did. So it was processing security clearances, actually, for a contractor in Columbus, Ohio. And then while I was working there, I actually ended up getting a job outside of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton with a contractor. Again, doing kind of security clearance stuff. They were building up a classified program. Just my experience with my security clearances and all that, it kind of transitioned well into that role. So I really enjoyed the job, but I didn't want to move to Dayton. I still, my goal was to, I want to live in Columbus. I was thinking about going back to school at Ohio State at the time. The girlfriend was in Columbus. We were starting to get serious again. We were kind of on and off during the military time. But now that I was back, I knew she wanted to stay in Columbus. So that was just, everything was pointing for me to stay in Columbus. So I was commuting every day to Dayton, which was about an hour and a half sometimes one way. So it was, it got to me pretty quickly, but I stayed there for about a year. And then I found a job in Columbus after that. So yeah, it was, and I got married right after that too in 2012. So.
Congrats on your marriage.
Thank you.
Do you still keep in contact with your military buddies?
Sure, I do. Quite a few, and I think that's the power of social media. I think, gosh, I probably joined most of the social media stuff in 2009, 2010. I was probably a little late to the crowd, but that was right as I was getting out. So it was, it worked well to kind of, oh, hey, let's be friends on social media. And, now 8 years later, I still see those people, they have 3 kids and they're married or they're still in. And, gosh, they're going to retire here in, 6 years or something. And they joined when I did. So yeah, I still do keep in touch with quite a few. It might be just kind of the social media thing. A couple guys I saw a couple times since I separated. When I was working in Dayton after the military, one of the airmen I deployed with my first time in Iraq, she was coming through Wright-Patterson, so we, grabbed lunch. Again, that was probably all through social media, staying in contact that way, social media or emails. So yeah, and I still do. There's probably a good dozen or two that, I still chat with, pretty casually, but yeah, I still consider friends to this day and still keep in touch with.
Are you a part of any veterans organizations?
I am part of IAVA, which is the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. Outside of that, really my day job now, I work for the State of Ohio Department of Veteran Services. But outside of that, veteran organizations, I think that's about it.
That's great.
Yeah, so yeah.
Tell me about your job now.
Sure, so kind of the high-speed track, after I took the job back in Columbus in 2012, it was with a large bank in Columbus doing mortgage operations and real estate stuff. I just got married at the time. We just bought our first house, so I just kind of got introduced into this whole world of real estate, which I loved. I never, you asked me that 5 years ago, I would have called you crazy and said, what's real estate? But I really enjoyed it, and that's when I started thinking about, going back to school. So I actually went back to community college. I got all my credentials to get my real estate license and start being a realtor in Columbus. While I was doing that, I figured out Ohio State's business school had a real estate finance program. So I said, what the heck, let's just go for it. So I ended up going back to Ohio State full-time and getting a business degree in real estate. While I was at Ohio State getting my degree, I worked at their military and veteran service office on campus, kind of a part-time thing, maybe 10 hours a week. We would work with the new students transitioning from military to civilian life to a school with 50, 60,000 students, most of them 18 to 20 years old. So you talk about the transition from military to civilian life, there's a huge transition from military to higher education as well. So we would kind of help new students, kind of mentor them, help them schedule classes, help them find their classrooms, because it's obviously a large campus. But I really kind of got tapped into the veterans network through Columbus and the organizations and just kind of veterans helping veterans, which, since I separated in 2010, I really hadn't had that part yet of kind of giving back and helping veterans. 2010 to 2015 was me just, I want to be a civilian, I want to get back out there and do the civilian thing. So this was kind of my first dive back into helping veterans, and I really enjoyed it. So when I graduated in 2016 at Ohio State, I had a whole nice real estate investment job lined up for me. But then this job with the state of Ohio was just being developed as a workforce consultant, where they were creating a team of consultants to go around Ohio, helping employers hire veterans, basically. Where there was the whole push to hire veterans, I think a lot of companies were starting to understand that's a great thing. Veterans bring a lot to the table. A lot of employers, though, were having trouble, translating skills, finding veterans, understanding veterans. So the state of Ohio developed this team to go out and work with employers, the HR staff members who aren't veterans and don't know anything about the military and see a military resume and just don't know how to decipher it, or don't know how to interview a veteran or where to find them. So that's where this team was being created. And it just happened to be created right as I was graduating Ohio State. So I went in and I applied for the position. My boss at Ohio State, I think, put a good word in for me and said, you really need to go to apply for this position. I think you'd be really good at it. So I did. I got offered both this real estate job and the job at the state, and I just couldn't pass up. I had just spent a year at Ohio State kind of helping veterans, and I kind of wanted to continue that. So I joined the Department of Veteran Services in 2016, and I'm still there 2 years later. So.
And you enjoy your job?
I do. Yeah, so there was 3 consultants. I worked out of Columbus. We just kind of reshifted. I now manage the section, so I manage the State Department, the workforce section for the state now. And I have a couple guys on my team. We just hired a new gal up in Akron. So we try to cover the whole state, work with any employer. And yeah, it's a very rewarding job to go out and, the bad thing is we don't work a lot with veterans. But it's kind of good because we're on the other side of the coin. We're working with the non-veterans to help them connect with the veterans. So we don't work with a lot of veterans, but it's rewarding to know that hopefully on the back end we're rewarding veterans with career opportunities.
Well, I appreciate you.
Yeah, well, thank you.
I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean it's been a great job so far. We're about 2 years in, and we're still going strong. So hoping to keep the momentum going.
Okay. Has your military service impacted your feelings about war or the military in general?
Yeah, I think so in a positive way. Like I said, when I joined the military, I wasn't sure what to expect. I think I probably had the same, kind of stereotypes that maybe a lot of Americans have of, oh, you go join the military, you crawl through the mud and shoot a gun and drive a tank. And, you just kind of have that feeling, whether from the movies or, just growing up and not knowing. I mean, it's just lack of knowledge, basically. So then going through the process, and here I got, not only a 2-year degree while I was in the military, but I ended up getting a bachelor's degree at Ohio State and 0 student loans. This was all, achieved through military GI Bill and tuition assistance. So you don't think of that part when you're in, you think about military. And then even wartime. I mean, again, you think about, you just think about the guys out there breaking in doors and shooting tanks and flying helicopters, but you don't realize the support function that goes on with a lot of these operations. So seeing it firsthand, you just see all the great men and women that go over there and do all these, thousands of different jobs. I think I learned recently, I think 1 out of 7 jobs in the military is labeled a combat specialty, meaning 6 out of 7 jobs in the military are some sort of support function. So that's just something you don't think about. You don't think about the administrative roles or the finance roles in the military, the HR, the healthcare, all these other different jobs that exist in the military and that are needed on a day in and day out basis, all the maintenance and logistics. It's just incredible to see all of that kind of work together during a wartime situation and see all the great men and women do that. So yeah, I think my viewpoints probably have shifted, and I think it's much more positive now than it probably was before.
What message would you like to leave for future generations that will hear or see this video?
Sure. Boy, that's a good question. If you're thinking about joining the military, I say, give it a shot. Learn about it, because like I said, I think stereotypes exist about the military, but there's so many benefits from joining, whether it's the travel, whether it's the education, whether if I stayed in for 14 more years, here in 6 years in 2024, I could retire, at 40 years old and have half a paycheck for the rest of my life. So there's just, a lot of people make it a career. So I think there's just so many opportunities in the military that I think if someone is thinking about joining or wants to learn more, I say research it and talk to recruiters, talk to ROTC, talk to other veterans that have been through the process and see what they have to say about it. Because it was a great opportunity. Like I said, in 2002, 2003, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And here 15 years later, managing a State Department with a bachelor's degree, with 3 deployments under my belt, and just 6 great years of experience that I could never change and would never take back for anything. So.
That is so wonderful. Is there anything you feel like we haven't discussed in this interview? Anything else you'd like to add?
One thing I always say is I don't think military spouses get enough recognition. I had a girlfriend through a lot of the deployments I went on, and I just, now I have 2 small children, and you have a whole different perspective now of being married and having children of some of these men and women that deploy, and leave 3, 4, or 5 kids at home with a significant other for 6 months or even a year or 15 months. And it's just mind-boggling knowing how did they do that? So I think, we need to give military spouses a lot of credit because I think they fly under the radar too much. And I think that's something that I try to, doing my job now, I try to tell employers, just don't think about veterans or, people in the Guard and Reserve. Think about the spouses too, because they bring a lot of skill sets. They've been through a lot as well, on a whole different front, and they have a lot of different skills. And I like to give them a lot of recognition as well, because 2 kids now. First of all, I can imagine leaving them for a deployment. So just the men and women that do that are amazing. And then, having to stay home, be the single parent for, a year, maybe, 5 times in a career is just mind-boggling, like I said. So it's a lot of credit to those folks as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
This concludes the interview with Ryan Blackburn at Wright State University. Okay.
Awesome.
Yay!
How are we on time?